Alrighty, we are in order at 8:01. The agenda is pretty straightforward. I will bring it up on the screen real fast. Where'd it go? Come on, be at. Yeah, I do want to show all windows. Come on. Encyclopedia, that's not it. One quick moment. I gotta go find it. Do that. There we go. Now we're getting somewhere. My apologies, folks. That's what I'm after. If it will. Hopefully it will. No, not that. Where did my Zoom meeting go? Yeah, computer. Mr. Secretary, there we go. Would you go ahead and take the roll, please?
Olmsted. Olmsted.
Here.
Barber.
Here.
Benner.
I think you said Benner here.
Yep, I did. Bergman.
Here.
Bowman.
Here, and it sounds kind of like you got a reverb going.
I'm sorry about that. Brooksbank.
Here.
Coco.
Here.
Tyler.
Present.
Kinzer.
Here.
Johnson.
Present.
Labrie.
Here.
Weatherman.
Here.
And I saw that Ms. Clift is standing in for McCo's tonight. Is that correct? McCo's here.
Miss Cliff, you're muted.
I'm here. I'm sorry. I thought I was unmuted.
Melton. Melton. And I'm here, and Mr. Seebeck is here. Shaw from Georgia. Shaw. Thompson.
Thompson's here.
Weir. Mr. Weir from New Hampshire. Patterson. Clift is here.
Yes.
Okay. Edwards. Gonzalez. Gonzalez. Goodley. Harlos. Ms. Harlos.
I don't think she's here. I didn't see her pop in.
Thank you. Marinovich. Matt from Illinois. Osborne, Redmond,
Here.
Rogers, Roaming,
Here. Last name spelled Romeo, Oscar, Mike, India, Golf. Thank you.
Yep. I believe that's what said we have in the minutes. If you could take a look at that, make sure it's correct.
No N. No November.
Okay.
Thank you.
Should be fixed now.
Awesome.
Wildheisen,
Here.
all right, Mr. Chair, if you could tell me who the guests will be tonight.
One quick moment. Let me figure out what in the world is going on with my screen here, and I will do exactly that.
And I think somebody else just joined the chat.
Oh, that was Mr. Thompson checking back in. He ducked in and out.
Yeah, that's me.
For some reason, I'm having trouble with my screen being. I'm not getting what I need to thing here. So one moment here. Participants. Okay, let's see. First question, who's on here calling in from area code 626?
That is me, Carrie Eiler.
Okay, thank you. Let's see here now. We have, let's see. I see, let's see. I see Miss Tewksbury from California.
Okay.
And that's all I see for guests. So. So why in the world? I'm going to be stopping sharing for a quick moment just because I don't know what the heck is on my screen. There we go. That looks better. Now let's try this again. And let's go to the right page. And for some reason, this thing is keeping me in full screen, and I don't want to be in full screen. No, it's not a volume thing, guys.
First November is 11.
Yeah, I believe, okay, we have Miss Cliff's for Mr. McCoe's for Alaska. We have, was Mr. Benner here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. So we have, let's see. All of the LNC primaries are here. We have Mr. Redman alternating for Ms. Leatherman, who is here. We have Mr. Romig backstopping Mr. Ensor for Pennsylvania, but Mr. Ensor is here. And Mr. Veldhusen is alternating either LNC or Virginia, depending on who steps out. And Mr. Trokel is here for Virginia. Anyway, so we have everybody here for the primaries. Save Mr. McCoe's, and Ms. Cliff is filling in for him. So we do have a quorum. We will proceed to public comment. First and foremost, Ms. Tewksbury, since you're the only member of the public here, do you have anything you'd like to talk to the group?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All righty. Is there any member of the committee who wishes to say anything in public comment?
I do. I've got a quick something.
Go ahead, sir.
I personally want to apologize for not being here last Tuesday. Our county convention went a little bit long, and I just was not feeling it.
Any other members?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would like to say something if that's all right.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, all I'd like to say is so far I'm impressed with the deliberations of this committee. Even where there's disagreement, it's handled respectively, and that's a pretty important thing. So congrats and kudos to all of you.
Thank you for that, sir.
I'd like to mention some recent news. This is Kier Cliff from Alaska.
Go ahead, Ms. Cliff.
The state of Alabama Supreme Court found that frozen embryos were people. And I think it might be important at some point that we address that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I don't know why. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to point out if you would like that discussion to be made, I would suggest bringing up a motion for a bylaws amendment or for a platform amendment, and you can do that at the appropriate time. That's in reference to the previous speaker.
Yeah, I would recommend, Ms. Cliff, that either a proposal or an amendment to a plank would be written up and presented for us to debate and discuss rather than try to wordsmith something on the fly. Forgive me for
Thank you.
while I'm going half and half here, but I'm trying to get my computer's being stupid. I'm trying to get things, trying to sort them out at the same time while talking, and I apologize if I seem a little distracted. I'm not. It's just for some reason my Zoom client is acting very strange, and no, I don't know why. Because it is like not tracking the full screen the way it needs to. Okay, I think we're in good shape now. Alrighty.
Well, thank you. I also would like to point out that the Alaska legislature is now considering a bill that would do pretty much the same thing as this bill that came out of Alabama in 1872 that their Supreme Court ruled on. Thank you again.
All right, no worries. I'm going to ask everybody, if you're not speaking, to please mute yourself, not mute yourself, sorry, just to keep the background noise down. I do apologize for having to say that, but it's just, I'm getting a lot of feedback here, and that's maybe carrying everybody else. When we last left off, we had just finished with looking at the carryover of Proposal 18 from the last committee, which was involving parental rights. And we were getting ready to take up the carryover of Proposal 19, personal relationships and self-expression. And I also have a proposal related to that, but let's take a look at number 19 at 19 first. So if you'll bear with me for a moment, I'll just bring that up real fast. And I'm going to change gears here and share that one. There it is. There we go. All righty, can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
All righty. I think I need to move this over here. Moving the chat window over so I can work with what I'm doing here. The problem with me, folks, is I'm working off of one laptop screen here, so it's a little bit cramped. So I apologize. I'll be jumping around a lot of different screens. All right. This was a carryover from Proposal 19 from the last committee, involved personal relationships, that blank 1.4. The idea before was that government should not be able to interfere with personal relationships and rights, but didn't make a statement regarding whether educational institutions or employers or merchants may able to decide what a person's gender is in contradiction of the person's own view. So the proposal was to add language to it. And the proposal was roughly as follows. For 1.4, I'll read the whole thing off partially for the recording and so everybody can follow along. Because I know Ms. Eiler is on the phone versus on a computer. 1.4, personal relationships. Old language. Sexual orientation, preference, gender, or gender identity should have no impact on the government's treatment of individuals, such as in current marriage, child custody, adoption, immigration, or military service laws. New sentence. Individuals have sole authority to determine, the sole authority to determine and express their own gender identities. Back to old language. Government does not have the authority to define, promote, license, or restrict, add the words self-expression and, old language, personal relationships, regardless of the number of participants. Consenting adults should be free to choose their own sexual practices and personal relationships. Until such time as the government stops this illegitimate practice of marriage licensing, such licenses must be granted to all consenting adults who apply. So the motion before us is to add in the new sentence and also the word self-expression and. They're in blue on your screen. Small committees do not need a second, so we will move to debate on the motion. Don't everybody raise their hand at once, but I will get to you in the order I see you. And I see in Mr. Barber, Mr. Labrie. Go ahead, Mr. Barber.
Yeah, good evening. I just got a minor one that it's almost a grammatical thing, but not quite. Where you added in self-expression and it would make more sense to me if it said or instead of and. I think maybe I'll make a motion to make that amendment.
Okay, I want to ask the question first off
Sure,
before we go to debate about it. The amendment's in order. Is there any objection from the committee to switch that before we go further? Okay, hearing none, we're just gonna, and I apologize, but it's a great point. I think it's a well-made point on the grammar, so we'll just make that adjustment right now. And thank you, sir.
No, thank you.
Do you have anything further on that at the moment?
No, I do not.
Okay, Mr. Labrie.
Yeah, I was just gonna say this seems like a relatively unimportant change with very little impact. And that being said, given the composition of the convention, come whatever it is, May or whatever, I doubt this would pass anyways. And I advise just to shoot this down because it feels like a waste of this committee and the convention's time.
Thank you, Mr. Labrie. Any further debate on the motion? Mr. Bowman.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. The only objection I've seen here in this discussion was one regarding the viability of the motion itself. And I think we could address that. And I think I may have even brought this up after spending 2 days debating the one regarding immigration and trade, that we can put things at the end that are likely to be the biggest time draggers and put the most likely to pass up front. We could still do that while still supporting a change if time permits. And agendas do change at conventions. If anyone was around in 2022, we had the entire agenda was redone. So these things are not written in stone. So I would be for considering the motion on its own merits, and as far as viability, yeah, put the less viable ones near the end.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I just want to add, as somebody coming out of Texas, this is a very relevant issue because we have a lot of government intervention happening on this. There's a lot of other states that have government intervention happening when it comes to trying to tell people what their gender identity is for. So I think this meets the timeliness test on this issue. In terms of expanding our coalition, which was one of my other tests, this clearly helps with people who in the transgender community who feel they are not well represented in our platform as they have historically been. We should be very clear that authority to define oneself, to identify oneself lies with the person. That is one of the last things the government has any business doing, any more than telling you what your name is, or, the most private details. This is about as close to thought policing as you can get. I encourage the committee to pass this on principle and that this does expand our coalition. If the delegates choose to reject it, it's not something they've communicated before that they wanted to reject something to this effect. And I won't presume that they would reject something which seems pretty clearly libertarian. Thank you.
Mr. Brooksbank.
Yes, I just have a question about where we are in the process of things. If we approve this, does this mean that we're definitely going to be presenting it? Or at some other point in time, are we going to be, calling and narrowing things down as to what we will actually present?
Great question. And to answer it, if we do adopt this to go into preliminarily go into the report, is preliminarily a word? I guess it is. Then it would fall for consideration in our ordering of our report. And at that point, we would make a determination as to which ones of these proposals we feel would have, as a committee, have the best, should be presented first. Bearing in mind that we only have 90 minutes of time at the convention to present, and we're probably looking at a max of 6 to 8 proposals. So adopting this to go at this point to go into the report does not guarantee it would be heard at convention, and we do still have the ability to sort out the proposals later. We have not even begun to even look at that exercise yet.
So later on, we can, as a committee, decide that we're going to pick the top 6 and that's the ones we're going to present, or you could pick a number.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Or is there any further debate on the motion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Montoni.
Just so we know what we're all voting on, can you read the text of what we're actually voting on? Wasn't there an amendment to this?
There was an amendment to it. The amendment was to change the "and" after self-expression to "or." And that passed without objection.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and also, Mr. Montoni, I did see your notice in the chat. Approval of the minutes was not on the actual agenda. I would ask the members of the committee to off meeting to take a look at the meeting minutes from the last meeting and forward any corrections to Mr. Montoni for getting those knocked out, and we can address them as we need to. Minutes are not necessarily required to be kept in the committee, but they're good to have anyway. So we have a little flexibility in how fast we have to get them sorted out and approved. All righty, let's look at the chat real fast. I'm just keeping an idea of things here real fast, see what's going on. Okay, is there any further debate on the proposed amendments to the plank? Okay, it is the chair's notice that there would be an objection to this. as Mr. Labrise has stated. So I will read this off for the minutes and for the recording as to where it now stands before we come to a vote on this. So the motion is to adopt the amendments to the plank so that the plank will read as follows. 1.4, personal relationships. Old language, sexual orientation, preference, gender, or gender identity should have no impact on the government's treatment of individuals, such as in current marriage, child custody, adoption, immigration, or military service laws. New language. Individuals have the sole authority to determine and express their own gender identities. Back to old language. The government does not have the authority to define, promote, license, or restrict, add the words self-expression or, back to old language, personal relationships, regardless of the number of participants. Consenting adults should be free to choose their own sexual practices and personal relationships. Until such time as the government stops its illegitimate practice of marriage licensing, such licenses must be granted to all consenting adults who apply. Is everybody in the committee clear what we're voting, what we're going to be voting on here? All right, Mr. Secretary, would you take the roll for the vote, please?
California. Mr. Alstead,
No.
Harper,
Aye.
Benner,
No.
Bergman,
Aye.
Bowman,
Aye.
Brooksbank,
Brooksbank votes aye.
Mr. Chair, point of personal privilege. There's a lot of background noise. Can we once again ask everyone to mute themselves if they're not actively speaking to the group?
Yes, please, folks, so we can hear things clearly.
Thank you. Mr. Choco,
I'm going to abstain.
Eiler,
No.
Zer,
No.
Thompson,
Yes.
Labrie,
No.
and Mr. Chair, I believe somebody just entered the room. Who is that?
That was Mr. Thompson again.
Okay. Leatherman,
Yes.
Ms. Clift,
Yes.
I'm going to vote aye. Let's see, I'll come back around to you, Mr. Seebeck. Mr. Thompson,
Yes.
Mr. Seebeck.
Chair is not voting.
One moment. 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. Mr. Chair, I see 8 ayes. Five, excuse me, 5 nays, 1 abstention, and 1 not voting.
Did we not have 16 people?
I believe I called 16.
That's only 15 on the totals.
Now let me recount. Pardon me. There were 9 ayes, not 8.
All right, thanks. With a 9 to 5 to 1 and 1, this passes to go in. We will now move on to the next one. One quick moment. And I will bring that one up. Switch my share around to that one real fast. There we go. This is from me. This is a very simple change. As worded, it addresses current laws, but it does not address future laws. So my motion here is to simply strike the word current and leave everything else the same. Now, I will point out that for the previous one we just passed, nothing that was adopted there for a proposed amendment to the plank would be affected by this. The word current was in there on the other one, and the other wording does not impacted by taking current out. That being said, this is a separate proposal, just because even though it's in the same plank, it's a slightly separate issue.
So would we not merge these together in our report?
We could. It would not have an impact on either one, so we could merge it, yes. So, we have debate on the motion. Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, so at first glance, I understand what you're saying about that. But when I think about this in the context of the other plank we were looking at it, where we talk about how we aspire that marriage laws should be equitable and non-discriminatory. Your proposal for taking this out assumes that all future laws will be non-compliant with our platform and will not abide by these. But if we have success in the other plank of our platform, then those laws would be compliant with this. So I think it's just, I think the current makes sense here when I think about it a little bit more, because it's trying to use the current laws as an example and saying this is not okay. This is not the type of laws regarding marriage, child custody that would conform to our platform. But we're not precluding future laws from being compliant with our platform. So I think while I understand what you were saying about future laws and that probably there will be future laws, I don't think sweeping that broadly to assume that all future laws will be non-compliant with our platform, I don't think that adds to it. So that's my thought. I don't think I would go with changing the language. It seems like it was well thought out before.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Is there other debate on the motion? Mr. Bowman. You're muted, sir. There you go.
Yeah, the bot told me that too. I think perhaps the reason of striking current might be because if you look at it, let's say we just drop everything between current and the words laws. I mean, as a thought experiment, that's not a motion, such as in current laws as opposed to such as in laws. I think an anarchist position would be that having laws regarding such things at all is wrong. In fact, even a minarchist might take the position that having laws on those particular matters might be wrong. So current would be somehow saying, well, these laws are bad right now, but we can fix them. So I think that might be more the distinction we're talking about rather than future and present. That's my take on it.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Any other debate on the motion? All right, I will speak to it in a minute because I'm the one who wrote this. I was thinking temporally in terms of current versus future. However, I also think that both Mr. Bowman and Mr. Johnson make good points. Mr. Johnson specifically makes something a point I had not considered. And that is something that I believe is a valid point, to the level of I'm going to ask this body, because without objection, to withdraw my motion.
Is that in order? I mean, it's on the floor. We've been discussing it. Shouldn't we just vote it down if we don't want it?
It's technically in order, but if the maker of the motion is asking the body to withdraw it, somebody else could not. However, if you just wish to move to a vote and vote it down, we can do that too.
No, I'm not saying we have to do that. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, the parliamentary area of withdrawing of the maker of a motion withdrawing it is a little tricky, and it depends on who you want to talk to about it. It has the virtual effect of voting down the motion. If the body wishes to move to a vote instead, we can do that just fine. I guess I'm asking what the feel of the body is on this for that, if there would be an issue with withdrawing it. But I'll leave that for a thought. And let's leave it up here for the moment. And Mr. Brooksbank, go ahead.
If the maker of the motion wishes to withdraw, I would have no problem with him doing so.
So, I'm going to double check something real fast. So I'm going to ask I'm going to ask the committee to stand at ease for a moment, just so I can do a quick duck into Roberts to make sure that what I'm saying is actually correct. Because I'd rather be wrong and get it right than just assume it's right without getting it wrong, without being sure. Roberts 3311. Condition. Okay. Before the motion has been stated by the chair, that will be me. It's the property of its mover, that was also me, who can withdraw or modify without asking somebody, anyone. Which we're already past that point. And then after it's been made by the chair, it does belong to the meeting of the whole. The meeting must request the assembly's permission to withdraw or modify the own motion, which is what I did. So that being said,
if nobody objects to withdrawing it, then you withdraw it.
that is a correct statement. So that being said, I'm treating a point of parliamentary inquiry made by either myself or somebody else to answer that question, and I will then reiterate the question. Is there objection to withdrawing the motion?
Yes.
Mr. Bowman does raise an objection, therefore we will continue with debate. I do have the option of putting the question on during the request, but that's okay. I'm not going to bother with that. We'll just keep on going. Mr. Bowman, further debate?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that actually, given what I had previously said regarding my interpretation of striking current, which apparently was not the original intent, I still like it with the intent that I read into it, which is I don't really think even as a minarchist, government really has business defining interpersonal relationships.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bowman. Any further debate? Okay, hearing none, we will bring this to a vote. Mr. Secretary, whenever you're ready. The motion is simple: to strike the word current from the plank.
Sorry, I had myself muted. Mr. Hofstad?
No.
Barber,
Yes.
Benner,
No.
Bergman,
No.
Bowman,
Do you say Bowman?
yes.
Aye.
Brooksbank,
No.
Proko,
Abstain.
Eiler,
No.
Windsor,
No.
Johnson,
No.
Labrie,
Abstain.
Leatherman,
Yes.
Ms. Cliff,
Yes.
and I'm gonna skip myself and Mr. Seebeck. Thompson,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, Mike Seebeck.
You should, did you vote, Mr. Secretary?
No, I haven't. I guess I can do that first. I'm gonna cast an aye.
Okay.
And your vote?
If I have this correct, it is 6-7 to 1. Chair vote would not make a difference either way, so the chair is not voting.
Okay. Mr. Chair, we have 6-7 to 1.
And that fails. So much for that one. But that's okay, folks. I'm not upset. The next one on the agenda was the government debt one, courtesy of Mr. Ensor and Mr. Alstad. So I'll bring that one up real fast. I will read this off first, and then we'll go from there. Hope everybody can see my screen okay, I presume?
Yes.
Alrighty. Problem, the platform's current prescription for dealing with government debt, saying it, quote, burdens future generations without their consent, unquote, and calling for a balanced budget amendment is indistinguishable from the mainstream, quote, fiscal conservative pipe dream, which went out the window decades ago, as well as focusing on the federal level and implying that people currently living consented. As the problem of government debt continues to grow out of control, we should have a solution that is neither moderate nor laughably unachievable, nor exclusive to the federal level, as well as make clear that the people don't consent to the government debt like they do to private debt. Solution, replace the current fiscal conservative, in quotes, the announcement of the burdening future generations and calling for a balanced budget amendment with a Rothbardian denouncement of all government debt as illegitimate, all people as non-consenting, and call to default on at all levels. Benefits. This will radically differentiate us from conservative Republicans, in quotes. It will make clear that it is not just future generations who are being burdened without their consent in our view, and it will provide a solution to uncontrolled government spending, which is radical yet can be adopted at any time. The proposal would read as follows. Okay, this is a lot of strike and replace here, and that's okay. I'll ask you to bear with me here. 2.5 government debt. Government, strike the words should not incur. Debt, add the words is wholly illegitimate. Strike which, replace with as it. Burdens, strike future generations, replace with the people without their consent. We support, strike the passage of a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution, provided that the budget is balanced exclusively by cutting expenditures and not by raising taxes. Replace with repudiating all government debts at all levels as a means of both relieving unjust financial burdens and limiting the growth of government. Now, I know that was a lot, so I'm going to read it one more time with what it would be if it's just everything that is stricken and added were okayed. Okay, just to make it a little easier. Government debt is wholly illegitimate as it burdens the people without their consent. We support repudiating all government debts at all levels as a means of both relieving unjust financial burdens and limiting the growth of government. Now, at this point, this was proposed by Mr. Alstad and Mr. Ensor. I ask either one of them, do they wish to make the motion for debate on this plank? It's a formality, but it needs to be asked. Okay, which one was that? Which one of you?
I made the motion, Mr. Ensor. I didn't know if Mr. Offset did as well, but
no, it's okay. I just want to make sure we get it on the record. Now, hold on one moment. Mr. Matz has just entered the waiting room. All right, to do this, because this was a proposal by someone other than me, I see in the queue, I see Mr. Johnson, Mr. Cholko, and Mr. Bergman, Ms. Clift, and I think there's one more down here. One moment. And Mr. Bowman. At least that's the order I'm seeing them. However, I am going to recognize Mr. Ensor or Mr. Alstad first because they are the maker of the motion to speak to their proposal first.
I'll certainly take the opportunity.
Who's this?
Mr. Ensor, Pennsylvania.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. So I think we've all recognized that, or we've seen that, especially the national debt is growing at an insane rate, but it's not entirely exclusive to the national level that we have problems with government debt. And as this becomes a much more pressing problem, we need to offer a solution. And a balanced budget amendment is quite frankly not sufficient. And it's not sufficient at either the federal level or any other level. In my original making of the motion, I included some reading material supporting it, but the basis of it is that government debt is fundamentally not legitimate under libertarian principles because a legitimate private debt is between two consenting parties where the creditor and the debtor are both private individuals making choices about their own property. Whereas with government debt, what is going on is the creditor is agreeing to loan money to the government as a debtor, and the government is promising to pay them back with money that it will be extracting from the citizenry at a future time, which, morally speaking, is basically the equivalent to a group of thieves making an agreement as to how they will parcel out the loot from a future heist. And not to mention the issue of how government keeps growing out of control is the fact that we have creditors who keep giving this money on the basis of it being promised to them, which means that they are promising that they will be fleecing us, the people, and giving it to those creditors. So my proposal is that we say that we repudiate it, which in discussion online was told that we should go with that as opposed to default, because default implies that we recognize it as legitimate, but we say that we can't pay it, whereas repudiate means we denounce it as illegitimate and say we're not going to pay it. And not only would this be the moral thing to do, it would have a practical benefit of immediately causing a crisis of faith amongst potential creditors, realizing their money would not be guaranteed, and so they would be much more hesitant to loan money to the government with which to keep doing its projects, enforcing its tyrannical laws, at which point it would be fleecing us again to pay back. So my point is that this is a prescription which is both a moral one, a radically libertarian one, and a practical one as far as limiting government. And I think that's all I got for now.
It helps if I unmute myself first. I have a list here in the queue. We will go with Mr. Johnson first, followed by Mr. Chokol, Mr. Bowman, Ms. Cliff, excuse me, Mr. Chokol, and Mr. Bergman, then Ms. Cliff, Mr. Bowman, and Mr. Halstead. So, Mr. Johnson, go ahead.
Hey, thank you for putting this forward. I especially agree with the sentiment about trying to distinguish from conservative Republicans. I think that's a really important thing we should invest into with this. Before I had a couple questions, but before I do that, I wanted to see the feel of the room. If we could reformat this, considering it's only got one string of words that aren't even a sentence that are consecutive remaining from the original, if we could if there would be any objection to reformatting this to be a full replacement of the plank, I think that would make it easier to read for us, and I think that would make it much easier to read for the delegates than trying to kind of untangle the less than a dozen words remaining there.
All right, that would not be a substitute. That would just be a Scrivener's rewrite. I believe that would be a good idea. If without objection from the committee, I'll do that right now. It'll only take a moment or two. Let me just do it this way. So stand by for a moment or two for me.
Okay, I can ask my questions if there's no issue with that while you're doing that.
If you would please hold a moment while I work on getting this to where you're asking.
Sure.
Not trying to dissuade you, but just don't want to, just trying to keep focused, you know? And that doesn't matter. And then this, the whole thing becomes that. And then what I'll do up here is we'll take out the blue because it's down below. Until I've done this a bit lately. Let's see, do that. And then we do this, break out the paint roller, and do the whole thing like that. Except for, can't forget the period. Okay, that is exactly what Mr. Johnson had requested. I just hope that makes a little more sense for everybody. That does make it easier to read. So, Mr. Chokol.
I think the previous speaker still had some stuff. It's not to me yet.
I just had a couple.
Oh,
questions.
I'm sorry. You are correct. I apologize, Mr. Johnson. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I just had two questions. So coming from the position that we have a strong obligation to keep the platform compatible with both minarchism and anarchism, and from a minarchist perspective, the government effectively should function as some sort of corporate bot and has to, in turn, have some sort of budget to be able to expend on labor, capital. We all agree that taxation should not be the way it acquires that budget. Maybe it functions more like a nonprofit, but it would have to have some sort of standing as a business. If a business has to build a building, they have two ways they can fund it, right? They can either raise the capital up front, or they can take out a loan with some consenting creditor and fund it. So what would be the means that a minarchist government would fund capital investment? Would it just be that they have to raise capital up front? So that's my first question. And my second question is, when it says repudiating This would imply that all existing creditors who entered into a contract with the government here, which it is a legal contract, they would then have their rights violated to have that contract enforced. And I understand all of the stuff about, I understand all of the philosophy behind that, but I worry that that could be misinterpreted as a supporting individual rights not in that case. The right of all of those individuals, whether it be a grandma who bought some treasuries to invest in her portfolio, or somebody who's working at a company and they have a contract where the government promised to pay them for services they already rendered, that company now goes under. Do we support the rights of those individuals to have their contracts honored? So those are my two questions. Thank you.
Without the body, with no objection from the body, I would defer those questions to Mr. Edsel and Mr. Alstad because this was their proposal. Hearing no objection, Mr. Edsel and Mr. Alstad, could you address Mr. Johnson's questions?
Yeah, I can do my best to address them. As far as your first question, I would like to first premise this with the disclaimer that I am coming at this from the anarchistic perspective, so I can't fully represent the minarchism. So, but what I would say is that if we were in a situation where the government was raising money of its own and paying back money of its own, even money that it took out of loans, and it wasn't extracting it from us, from the people through taxation and inflation, we would be in such a radically different place from where we are currently that it would be nearly unrecognizable, at which point we might be looking at other changes to the platform at that time. I would say that as it currently stands, whereby the status quo is that government loans are going to be paid back through taxation and inflation, that we should say that we repudiate them all, and that if at a future time there comes a point where it would be seen as legitimate, and as you mentioned, maybe it is just they raise capital up front, but at that point I would wonder if a minarchistic government would even be in a position of having that level of responsibility where they would need to raise a significant level of capital or take out loans, because if it's a very small entity, then it wouldn't be doing large projects. But so I hope that's enough for the first question. As far as the second question, I would remind you that it may be a legal contract, but and you can say, like, we can talk about philosophy, but I mean, it is pretty clear that, well, let me rephrase. We need to be very clear about what our perspective is philosophically, and that is, it may be legal, but it is not moral. And there are some, and while there may be some smaller, lesser offenders who partook in this in order to get a payment for a retirement fund, that doesn't change the fundamental nature of the fact that it is still being promised to them out of the future taxation and inflation. And as much as I hate to go too cliche, I think this is very relevant. We would not, if we're still dealing with chattel slavery, we would not say the old slave owner's grandmother who depends on slave labor for her, for her care or whatever. That does not preempt the right of those who are in chains to be free. So I would argue that, far from saying that we violate individual rights, we make the statement that we are upholding them, and we are making clear that if you were a party to it, then, I mean, it's unfortunate, but this is immoral and it's unsustainable. And I don't believe that we should allow ourselves to be held back from denouncing something immoral just because it's the status quo under which people have participated and they could be harmed from it. There are people being harmed by that status quo by a much larger margin. I hope I've provided sufficient answer.
All well taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ensor. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Cholko.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that I think I agree with everything that Mr. Ensor said right there. And it had me thinking about Social Security. So probably everybody in this meeting here would support the abolition of Social Security. But if we're ever going to get there, the reality is that we are going to take away the benefit, and I'm using the air quotes if you could see me, the benefit that has been promised to a bunch of people. At some point, some people are going to get screwed out of that benefit. Frankly, it just has to be that way. Otherwise, we would never be able to end Social Security. I've been promised it. I've been paying in for 30 years. I'll be able to collect it in another 20 theoretically, but I would push the button right now to screw me out of all my money that I've paid in, because you just have to. You have to make it happen at some point. But then, to the plank as a whole, I mean, I feel like the balanced budget thing might have been nice a generation ago when there was talk about a balanced budget amendment at the federal level. But there's no talk about that anymore. That's not a topical thing. Aside from the fact that it would be insufficient, it just isn't in play. Nobody's talking about that stuff. So that language is not very relevant. And the language proposed here, to me, feels kind of like Libertarianism 101. Frankly, I kind of think it would be pretty ridiculous of us to not say it. So let's get this in the platform, hopefully without amending it all to hell, because it's beautifully written and says exactly what I think most libertarians believe.
Thank you, Mr. Cholko. Mr. Bergman.
Thank you. My questions relate to and extend upon one of Mr. Cholko's observations. When we use the words, or the word is proposed, all debt, does that open the door to questions defining what is or isn't debt? And I'm not just talking about, for instance, unfunded Social Security obligations here, which are not on the federal government's balance sheet, but let's say employee and veterans benefits payable, which is a line item that's a liability on the federal government's balance sheet. Are we saying that we're repudiating the future payment of employee and veteran benefits on employee pension and veteran benefits plans? So the words all, do you have to deliberate over what debt means? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bergman. Ms. Clift? You're muted.
Yeah, there we go. I'm glad he brought that up, because that word all has really been bothering me. So first I want to say I really like the second sentence, but I think the word all, government debts at all levels as a means of both relieving unjust financial burdens and limiting the growth of government, I think the word should be struck in both places, because I think that there are government debts at local levels, at my stock portfolio. I buy, people are building bridges with my money, and I'm going to get money back. So that's a consent. I've consented to help them with their debts. And some of them are considered very good buys. And that's why I have them, in my stock portfolio. So I think the word all should be struck. And otherwise that sentence is a little run on. I'm having some trouble with it, but it's a good sentence. The first sentence is one that I have even more trouble with. First of all, we elect officials. I realize that 50% plus one can elect an official and 49% did not give their consent for that official. I realize that, but it is what is in our Constitution. It is that we are consenting. We are asking our Congress people and our legislatures to give our consent because we have elected them. So I think that there's a problem with that sentence. And by taking out that phrase from the first part, the red part that we took out, and not by raising taxes, what we have said here is that they will have to raise taxes to balance, to get rid of the debt, because we're leaving that wide open. And I'm not, I could propose some language to change that. But it's kind of, this is what this is saying to me. If we're saying you cannot raise taxes, if you were saying that it's okay to raise taxes, you're leaving it in for them to raise them. So I'm going to quit right here and let somebody else take over. But I think that there is some problem with the language here that gives, quote, gives the government permission to raise taxes, because we're saying that they can't have a debt. And we are electing our officials, so we are giving consent. Maybe we can say that all increases in debt must be approved by Congress or by our elected officials. And usually in local governments, that is what is done. So perhaps we should do something like that. Just my 2 cents. And I will stop talking now.
Mr. Bowman.
I'm frankly glad I did not hear a motion to amend from the previous speaker, because I want to make one. And I think my striking the word all would be not as good as my motion, but of course I'm biased. I would move to amend this to state unsecured as the first word. So the addition of the word unsecured at the beginning, and therefore then government becomes small case. And the other word I would insert is the word such between all and government in the later use, in the second sentence.
So right here.
Yeah.
One moment. That is an order to amend. Mr. Bowman, do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, because in thinking about it, and especially when the minarchist position came up, that are there ways that the government can, as an organization, non-coercively raise funds to do things. And it occurs to me that if the government owns assets, and for instance, we could think in terms of natural resources or land, which arguably should also be sold off, but we've had presidential candidates who say the government should, pay off the debt by selling these things to and then therefore thereby privatizing those assets, basically. And this could also address the matter, for instance, of people buying bonds that are funding a government project where it's going to get money directly from the project. So there is a means of acquiring the money based upon some real asset that does not require a taxation or the inflation of the currency by, quantitative easing or counterfeiting or whatever you want to call it. That is still morally acceptable, and it would still make it clear that we recognize this debt that is forcing us to pay taxes or forcing future generations to pay taxes or getting us behind the back with inflation taxes, that is wholly illegitimate, which I think is really the core message in that. As far as the taxes, by the way, just to address one other thing the previous speaker brought up, we have other planks that address taxes, so I think that's still safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Is there anybody who wishes to speak to the amendment? I see hands raised that were in the queue for the main motion. That's why I'm asking. Please speak up.
Mr. Chair,
Who's that?
Mr. Enzer.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm just, I just want to ask clarification. What does, when you say unsecured, what is that specifying and what is it leaving out?
Mr. Bowman?
It is specifying debt that is backed by an asset that the loaner can collect on the debt based upon an existing asset rather than upon a future tax or some other unclear yet to be defined method of payment. It's the same meaning really as pertains to individuals or corporations as far as what secured and unsecured debt is. For instance, I got a mortgage on my house. That's a secured debt. I have credit card payments to make. Those are unsecured debts.
All right. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to the amendment? Okay, hearing none. I think there might be, but I will ask the question. Is there objection to the amendment?
Yes. Object.
I figured there was, but I had to ask. So hearing that and being no further debate, we will move to a vote on the amendment. Mr. Secretary, whenever you're ready. Just to restate, the amendment is to add the word unsecured at the beginning of the first sentence and add the word such between all and government.
I don't hear anything.
Stand by.
I'm moving the text over
I didn't hear anything either.
Stand by, folks. Stand by. Mr. Montoni is getting it together here.
Okay, Mr. Alston.
No.
Barbara.
Abstain.
If you said Benner, no.
Bergman.
No.
Bowman. Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Brooksbank.
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Troko.
No.
Eiler.
No.
Enzer.
No.
Johnson.
No.
Labrie. Mr. Labrie.
No.
Leatherman.
No.
Ms. Cliff.
Yes. Yes.
Thompson.
No.
And I'm going to cast an aye vote. Mr. Seebeck.
Chair is not voting.
All right, Mr. Chair, I see 4 ayes. Ten nays, 1 abstention, and 1 not voting.
All right, so by a 4-10 to 1-1, the motion to amend fails. Whoops, didn't want to take out all that. And we are back on the main motion. And I have in the queue, Mr. Alston, Mr. Brooksbank, myself, Mr. Barber, and Mr. Thompson. Mr. Alstad.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I don't have much to say because I'm kind of repeating what people before me have said, but I just think this is really well written. I think the balanced budget amendment is just such an outdated concept. It makes us look outdated. If we still talk about that, we're way beyond the point where a balanced budget amendment would even help us, because the service on our debt is killing us, even if we don't take on another dollar. And yeah, that's it. I support this. Thanks.
Mr. Brooksbank. I had you next.
Yes, as a minarchist, I would say, the way the government funds stuff is through, voluntary means. They come up with a plan and they go to the people and they say, hey, this is what we need. Please give us money. Or, they've done things in the past, they held lotteries, and such. So there is ways for the government to fund the projects that they want to do without taxation. But I do also have a problem with the word all, because there are debts that are owed and we should pay them. There are promises that have been made and we should keep those promises. Like like the issue with the veterans and what is actually a line item in our budget, so we owe them and we should pay them. So I would like to make the motion to remove the all from repudiating all government debts, and then at all levels.
So the motion is to amend to strike both cases of all there?
Yes.
Okay, got it. 1 second.
Or no, I'm sorry. Just the first all.
All right. All right, that is in order. Do you wish to further speak to it, Mr. Brooksbank?
No, like I said, I mean, we do have debts that are already incurred that we should pay. And now if there's some way we could work some kind of language, for future debts or whatever, then I would be open to that, a friendly amendment. But at this point, there are debts that we do need to pay, and And we should, as libertarians, we're big on contract law. So if we've signed a contract, if we've made a promise, we should own up to it and pay it. And because, we are in a representative government, so whether or not we actually, individually consented, we as a nation did consent. And that's my view.
All righty. I saw Mr. Barber and Mr. Thompson in the queue behind me on the main motion. So Mr. Bowman, did you wish to speak to the amendment?
Yes.
Go ahead.
What I'm going to say is effectively what removing the word all does. I just want us to understand what this does. Is it ambiguitizes the whole thing, because we support repudiating government debts. Okay. Does that mean repudiating some of them? Repudiating all of them? Repudiating certain kinds? That doing that, I suppose it's great for candidates because it gives them the flexibility of kind of taking either position without contradicting the platform. But that's what we're doing, is you're making it more ambiguous. Now, as far as suggestions about specifying, just future debts and that kind of thing, that's basically what I was doing with my unsecured thing, and it went down in flames. So I don't really see any other iteration of that passing. So I'm just saying that. I think if we mean all, we probably should just leave all there. And if we don't mean it, then it should have the word some. But as it is, it ambiguitizes it. And if that's the intent and that's what you want, then vote for it. If you don't want it to be ambiguous, then leave it there or change it to something else. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Mr. Enser.
I think somebody was in line ahead of me.
I actually had Mr. Barber still on the main motion. Mr. Barber, did you still in line for the main motion, or did you speak on the amendment?
No, I'm staying with the main motion, so I have nothing on this right now.
Go ahead, Mr. Enser.
Okay. To be perfectly honest, I'm somewhat ambiguous on how much this changes. I'm a little, obviously, as the one who wrote it, I'm slightly biased against it, but some of the arguments that have been brought up, I would like to address head on, namely the ones that I feel have been brought up multiple times. So, first of all, as far as we have contracts that have been taken out. We owe to people, and because there were promises made. Well, libertarian theory is not it's not about contracts. It's about property rights, and the only contracts that we recognize as legitimate are the ones which respect property rights. For example, we would not support. We would not say a contract for an assassination is of just random people or businessmen or whatever. We would not support that as legitimate. In fact, we would say that if somebody signed such a contract and took the money and then reneged on it, did not follow through, we would say that that person did the right thing. So the fact that there have been contracts made, that does not mean they are legitimate. And second point is, the whole thing about representative government. As was already pointed out, for the most part, a majority of the people who are taxed and subject to inflation did not vote for the people who are making those decisions, and in fact are strongly opposed to them. But even if they did vote for them, that does not necessarily mean that they agree with everything that they do. And I mean, I could go a pretty deep dive into the philosophy of it, but political representation, quote unquote, I think is very tenuous at best under libertarian theory, because our so-called representatives do things that all the time and vote on things all the time which we as private citizens do not have the right to do ourselves. Either it is denied to us, prohibited to us, we would be jailed for it. So I would simply point out that we are not living in a representative system. They don't represent us, they rule us. So those are the two arguments that I've heard brought up multiple times I wanted to address.
Thank you, Mr. Ensor. Is there any further debate on the amendment?
Yeah, Thompson, I'd like to say something.
Go ahead, sir.
I support removing the word all, and I would also support removing at all levels. And I just find it superfluous to the meaning of it doesn't add sufficient to justify it being there, where it would also raise opposition to this plank. And I like this plank as revised, and I think that the wording having all in it could, the perfect being the enemy of the good, right? Could cause this not to pass, and that would be something that I would not want. So I want this to pass, and I think that an edit such as removing all, and then, like I say, at all levels, just to keep it simpler, would be something I would support.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any further debate on the amendment? Hearing none, we will move to a vote on the amendment because it's pretty clear there'd be objection to it. So the amendment is to strike the word all from in between repudiating and government. Excuse me. Mr. Secretary, when you're ready, we will move to the vote.
Once again, we hear nothing.
I'm sorry, if you called for Alstead, I vote no.
Yeah, he did.
Okay, sorry.
Barber.
No.
No.
Bergman.
Yes.
Bowman.
Aye.
Brooksbank.
Aye.
Coco.
No.
Eiler.
No.
Enzer.
I think I'm going to abstain. I'm going to abstain.
Okay, thank you. Johnson.
No.
Labrine.
No.
Leatherman.
No.
Ms. Cliff.
Yes, just for fun.
Thompson.
Yes.
And I'm going to vote nay, Mr. Chair.
Chair is not voting.
All right, Mr. Chair, I see 5 ayes. 9 nays, 1 abstention, 1 not voting.
I confirm 5 911, the motion to amend fails. We are back on the main motion. I was in the queue next, followed by Mr. Barber, then Mr. Thompson. So I'm going to speak to some of this a little bit. First of all, I love the way this is worded. I think it's nice, it's succinct. I think it lays out the position very clear. I, for one, never consented to any of this debt being fostered upon me, and I know my son did not. I understand the concern about what happens to things like Social Security and so on. I personally would like to have the money that I had stolen from me out of my paychecks returned back to me. I could use that money. That being said, we have a government that is spending both revenue and debt to the tune of $1 million every 4 seconds. 24/7, 365. Okay. That is flipping insane. And the reality of it is that at 33, 32, whatever the hell trillion dollars it is right now, even if they froze spending at current revenue levels, revenue, not even more debt, just revenue, and had no more interest to pay, it would take 15 to 20 years to pay off the whole damn thing. That's what doing nothing else. No, you're shutting everything else in the government down to not do it. It's not going to happen. Okay, it's insane. A balanced budget amendment has been a good idea in the past, but even if you were to do what I've advocated for in the past of having a balanced budget where 90% of your revenues are what you spend and the other 10% goes to debt principal reduction, it would still take a good 50 years to pay it all off. Not going to happen. To address some other questions earlier, Plank 2.4 specifically addresses repealing of taxation, repealing of the income tax, abolishment of the IRS, and all extra constitutional programs and services, and support anything to reduce or abolish taxes. So the idea of worrying about a tax opportunity in here really doesn't exist because we address it in 2.4 plank. I also feel that if we, as the argument was made earlier about defaulting versus repudiating, this is not private debt. And I think we all agree under the concept of personal responsibility that if you take out a personal debt, you better pay it off. For a government debt, though, did any of us sign the promissory note? Did any of us ever sign the loan papers or whatever instrument that they used to take out this debt? No, they did not. We certainly didn't push the button at the Federal Reserve to create the money out of thin air. And while we have a so-called representative government, I sure the hell haven't voted for these people. To be honest, I haven't voted for a single elected official in my entire life. And the reason for that is because none of them actually stand by my views. I would hope they would stand. They don't stand by most of the people in this committee or this party's views because of how they're busy giving it to us up number 2 without lube, and they do it on a daily basis. So, representation. Where is it? Okay, we've had voting cases in the past of elections where the voter turnout of eligible voters that have elected a candidate, their margins, assuming they even hit a majority versus a plurality, turn out to be 20 to 25% of the eligible electorate. Not just those who voted, but everybody who could vote. That's not representation. That's not even a significant chunk of the population. That's terrible. And that's because people look at it and they say, why should I vote for these people? Well, they don't represent us. So then we don't represent us. So the idea of repudiating the debt because they're the ones who are doing it in the first place is also a repudiation of them. And that is something that as a party, we stand for by definition. We would be in this party if we didn't repudiate the duopoly and all the crap that they're throwing at us. So getting back to this whole this whole proposal. I love the way this is written. I think it takes the plank and brings it up to date in a positive way. And it sends a bold, clear message that the government isn't screwing it up. You know, in Colorado, every other year, we were seeing school debt and bond issues every other year because they were always crying poor. And every single one of those would be an increase in our taxes and debt in the long haul to pay them off. Well, if they were managing their money properly, they wouldn't be asking for these things in the first place. The same is true at the federal level. I love this idea. Let's put this in and let's let the delegates look at this and go, oh, yeah. Mr. Barber.
Well, those were some good comments, sir. Actually, I'm just kind of adding something that I ran across. It's funny that this whole thing comes up right now because about a week, maybe a week and a half ago, I got a newsletter from Americans for Prosperity, AFP group, which I'm sure most people here know about. And it's probably like 5 or 6 pages talking about balanced budget amendment and their idea for it. Yeah. AFP is basically a Tea Party group. Anyway, it just really struck me as odd that they came up with this long diatribe about all these different versions of balanced budget amendments. And I found them all to be very overly complicated. And so like other people are saying that, yeah, it's kind of past time for a BBA. It's just not going to make it. But I thought that was really interesting that the timing of this discussion versus that just really struck me.
Mr. Thompson.
Thanks. Two things. First thing, I think the comma after illegitimate is not necessary. And so I don't know, can we make an amendment or whatever to remove that comma, I guess?
Is there an objection to removing this comma?
Yes.
Okay. Go to proceed to your second point, Mr. Thompson, first, please.
Okay. And I still think that at all levels is superfluous to the thing, so I'd like to put an amendment in to remove at all levels.
All righty. Well, which one of those do you wish to move first?
Let's deal with the comma first and the wording second.
All righty. We will deal with the comma first. There was objection. I know that. This is a grammatical question. The comma is really optional. It does kind of set off the reasoning behind the main part of the sentence. I'm not going to get into the arguments of whether it's grammatically correct or not. I think it's optional. I do have one moment. I have Mr. Brooksbank still in the main motion queue. Mr. Bowman, did you wish to speak to this?
To the amendment, yes.
Go ahead.
For keeping the comma, libertarians seem to be notorious for writing very long run-on sentences that get confusing. As it is, this is in some ways to a non-initiate, maybe a little confusing to read. The comma makes it simpler because you can these clauses can stand or the first clause can stand independently. Government debt is wholly illegitimate. The explanatory clause then afterward, by putting that comma there, kind of sets it apart as an explanation of the previous statement, as it burdens the people without their consent. I think it's good. I like the comma there. The only thing I would change, if we weren't going to have a comma, I think a semicolon would be even better, but I'll just leave it alone and say keep the comma there. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion?
And then you can take out
Hold on. Hold on. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, hearing none, we will, because there's objection, we will take this to a vote. The motion is to strike the comma after the word illegitimate. Mr. Secretary, when you're ready.
Is this a substantive enough change that I need to record it in the minutes, or can we just take account?
Okay, that's a fair question, Mr. Secretary. Let's just take this as account if the body doesn't object. This is, pardon the expression, so in the weeds and so ridiculous that in terms of granularity, that a pure roll call I don't think accomplishes anything. So I'm going to ask, I'm going to lower Mr. Brooksbank hand. Don't worry, I still have you in the queue on the main motion. Show of hands, all in favor of striking the comma, raise your hand, please. Okay, I see 3. Okay, hands down, please. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Alrighty, I count 8. Hands down, please. Abstaining, please raise your hands. I'm sorry, Mr. Secretary, what was that?
I cannot raise my hand for some reason in my Zoom, but I am abstaining from this vote.
Okay, I see 3 abstentions and I'm not voting. So hands down, please. And what are our totals?
Mr. Chair, I can't see the whole screen because we're in the item view.
Okay. I believe that if I had the total correct, it was 3 in favor, 9 against, 3 abstentions, and 1 not voting. So the motion to strike the comma fails. And I believe, one moment, Mr. Thompson's second motion then was to strike. Mr. Thompson, help me out here. Was it to strike at all levels?
At all levels.
Alrighty. So is there debate on that amendment?
And I don't think it's debate, but I just need to say something. I think we need to take the S off of debts if we're making this change.
I believe that is a fair statement. Alrighty, hold on one moment here. My page, there we go. Okay, 1 second. I've got to pull over a fresh page of notations here for my own purposes. 1 second. just so I can get everything down, I have Mr. Brooksbank, Mr. Bowman. I'm not sure if that's the order, that's what we're going, and Mr. Ensor, and I'm going with that order because I'm not sure if it's the best one, but we'll go with it. So, Mr. Brooksbanks, do you wish to speak to the amendment? You're muted, sir.
No, sir, I'm in line for the main amendment. I'm
All righty,
sorry.
that's no problem. Mr. Bowman?
Yeah, first of all, I don't know if this is a point of order or not, but are we allowed to amend amendments?
We are allowed to amend amendments because the text in blue is the main motion. This striking move to strike at all levels, the first level amendment, and there is still available one more layer.
Okay, because the layer, yeah, so the most recent layer, which was the removal of the S, I would like to oppose that amendment because I think if we just leave it this way, we support repudiating all government debts, plural, as a means of relieving unjust financial burdens and eliminating the growth of government. What it does is it tightens up the sentence without losing any of the meaning that one originally had with at all levels. So I'm for for keeping the S.
The chair took striking the S as a scrivener's adjustment to the actual amendment to strike at all levels for grammatical accuracy.
It changed the meaning. It changed meaning.
I don't believe so. Debt is one of those words that both the singular can take on the plural meaning without adding the S on the end. It's one of those oddballs of the language. Debt can be a group or it can be a singular, depending on its context. And I would state that in this context that the wording could apply to the plural.
Like deer and deer.
Yes. So I'm going to rule that point is not well taken. Mr. Ensor.
So I'd like to speak on the first order amendment, if that's where we are.
That's where we're at. Yes.
Okay.
We're only at one order.
Okay. So the reason I included that specific language is because I wanted to make it clear that it's not just because the federal level, that's the one that's in the news. That is the one that's the most crazy for sure. But it's also not the only level at which we're going to have unsustainable and immoral debts. And part of my motivation for this was an article that was written by an elected libertarian in my state, Ben Sievers, who was elected to local level. And he talked about how he saw repudiating the local level debt as a way of reducing government at the local level as a practical means of doing so. And some of his reasonings were what I referenced when I initially made the motion. So I would oppose this because I think it is important that we make it clear that it's not just at the federal level. Obviously, I think we can all agree that it would be better even without that specifier. Well, I think everybody would agree with it, but I still think it is materially important, which is why I included it originally.
Alrighty, I had Mr. Redmond in the queue.
Yeah, I think it could probably go either way, but I would be in favor of removing the S. If you substituted like the phrase national debt, you wouldn't really say national debts, and I think government debt, encapsulates the same thought.
Alrighty, is there any further debate on the amendment? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to a vote on this. Mr. Secretary, when you're ready.
I'll get this set up.
I'm sorry, what was that, Mr. Montoni?
One moment while I finish getting it set up.
Okay.
Right, Mr. Chair. Let's start with Mr. Elstad.
No.
Barber.
No.
Benner.
No.
Bergman.
Yes.
Bowman.
Nay. No.
Brooksbank.
Abstain.
Tyler. Tyler. Enzer.
No.
I'm sorry. Tyler, you were a no.
Correct.
Okay. Enzer.
No.
Johnson.
No.
Labrine.
No.
Leatherman. Leatherman. Clift.
No.
Johnson.
Yes.
And I'm going to vote nay. And Mr. Seebeck.
Chair will not be voting. Did we get votes from Ms. Leatherman and Mr. Brooksbank?
No.
Mr. Brooksbank? Ms. Leatherman? Are either one of you here?
I vote no. I'm here. I vote no.
That was with Ms. Leatherman. Looks like Mr. Brooksbank had stepped away. So,
No, I'm here.
okay, there you are. Your vote,
I'm
sir.
sorry. I voted yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, we didn't catch that. Okay. I believe that covers everybody now.
I see 3 ayes. $11 nays, 1 abstention, 1 not voting.
Alrighty, by a 3 to 11 to 1 to 1 vote, the motion fails. We are now back on the main motion, and Mr. Thompson, then Mr. Brooksbank. And I would remind the committee we have 5 minutes.
I have nothing else.
Mr. Brooksbank.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm going to make another motion. I move to add future in between all and government. Yeah, right there. My reasoning is because by calling for the repudiation of all of our debts current, then the only avenue left is default. And for us to call for a default on all the debts that we have currently incurred is most definitely unlibertarian. We should pay the debts that we have incurred. If we are calling for a default, then we are actually calling for theft by fraud. By saying that, oh, we'll pay you, we'll get you give this to us, we'll pay you, or you do this for us, we'll pay you, and then all of a sudden say, nope, fuck you. That's theft by fraud, and I will not support that.
Decorum,
So,
please.
so we should pay our current debts, but I will support wholeheartedly repudiating any future debts.
Is there any further debate on the amendment? I have Mr. Johnson, then I believe Mr. Bowman. 1 second. Yes, I do. Mr. Johnson, then Mr. Bowman.
I'd like to speak on the main motion.
Okay, I'll put you in the queue for that one. Mr. Bowman?
Yeah. I'm gonna put this in context. I'm almost old enough to collect Social Security. I've been paying into it my whole life, and I have no savings. That being said, to see a world set free in our lifetime, I would be willing to be screwed to that maximum extent. I no longer feel like I'm pushing Granny off the cliff because both my parents are dead. My grandparents are dead. I'm alive. I'm grandpa, except I don't have any kids. Okay, so I'm willing to hop off that cliff to see a world set free in our lifetime. So as far as this amendment basically kills the impact of the entire thing. It means we're not going to build future government debts. Well, we have trillions of dollars that we are being held to in debt right now. That's all.
All right. Ms. Eiler, I believe. Go ahead.
I just wanted to let you know that we're at time.
Okay, that is correct. We are at time. Is there a motion to extend to get this plank addressed? I think we're close, folks.
Go ahead and make the motion. I think this is important to address, and I'm tired of people stalling this out. So yeah, I'll make the motion to extend.
Is there a limitation on the time limit of this at the time of this extension?
Hold on 1 second. Mr. LaBreeze, was that you making the motion?
Correct.
Okay, would you be willing to put a time limit on that, please?
7 minutes.
Alrighty, there is a motion to extend for 7 minutes. Is there objection to extending for 7 minutes? Hearing none, we will go until 10:07. Is there further debate on the amendment? Okay, hearing none, I'm pretty sure that there is an objection here, so we will move to a vote. Mr. Secretary, when you're ready. Just to reiterate, the motion is to amend by adding the word future between all and government debts.
Okay, Mr. Osted.
Can you come back to me?
Harper. Harper.
No.
Tanner.
No.
Bergman.
No.
Bowman.
Did you say Bowman?
Yes.
Yes, he did.
No.
Brooksbank.
Yes.
Coco.
No.
Tyler. Tyler. Enzer.
Abstain.
My vote is no.
Johnson.
No.
Labrie.
No.
Leatherman.
No.
I'm sorry, Clift. Ms. Clift.
Yes.
That was a yes.
Yes.
Thompson.
No.
I'm going to cast a nay, and Mr. Seebeck.
Not voting.
Mr. Alsted asked me to go back to him. Mr. Alsted.
Oh, no.
All right, Mr. Chair, I see 2 ayes. $12 nays, 1 abstention, and 1 not voting.
Confirm by a 2 to 12 to 1 to 1 vote, the motion to amend fails. We are back on the main motion, and I had Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I would like to replace the word repudiating with eliminating. I think this gives us a road that most people will be happy to walk down together, whether you're on Mr. Brooksbank's end of things, where you think it's unfair that some people won't get repaid. I think it also leaves room for walking for people who want to see government completely eliminated and have to get rid of all debt as part of that by any means necessary.
Mr. Chair, orders of the day.
It was at 10:05. We still have 2 minutes. So the motion before us is to amend by striking repudiating and replacing it with eliminating. We have 2 minutes left. Is there anybody who wishes to speak to the amendment? Mr. Enser.
Yeah, just real quick. I would oppose this because it's too ambiguous. Repudiating has a clear meaning, eliminating does not.
Mr. Brooksbank.
I would say eliminating definitely does have a definition and a clear-cut definition. You know, and I would be in favor of this.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I would just say that the ambiguity is a good thing here because we need to have a big enough tent to move toward the goal of getting rid of all the government debt Some people are going to want to pay some parts of it off because they think it's fair. Some people are going to say, don't pay any of it off. We want to all be working on the same team and a platform that gets us on the same team.
Any further discussion on debate on the amendment? All right, hearing none, we are approaching time. I am going to make a motion to extend at least to get this amendment vote in. Since there is objection, Mr. Secretary, well, first of all, is there objection to extending just to get this vote in? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Secretary, we are ready for the vote on this. The amendment is to strike repudiating and replace it with eliminating.
Mr. Hofstad,
No.
Barber,
No.
Benner,
No.
Bergman,
Yes.
If you said Chalco, it's a no.
I said Bowman.
Well, it's still a no from Chalco.
No.
First name,
Yes.
Mr. Chalker, are you still a no?
I'm still a no.
Eiler? Eiler? Sure.
No.
Johnson?
Yes.
Gregory?
No.
Leatherman?
No.
Cliff?
No? Did you say
Thompson?
Cliff?
Yes, I did. I got you. Thompson?
Thompson, no.
And I'm going to vote no. Mr. Seebeck?
Chair is not voting.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I see 3 ayes. And whoever's got their mic open, if you can please mute yourself. I'm getting crosstalk here.
Mr. Secretary, I don't think we got Miss Eiler's vote.
Oh, that's right. She didn't respond.
Sorry,
Ms.
I
Eiler?
couldn't hear you. Your voice was so faint, but I'm also a no.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, I see 3 ayes. Well, nay. Amazingly, no abstentions and 1 not voting.
Okay, by 3 to 12 to 0 to 1 vote, the amendment fails. So we are at the main motion, but we are also at time unless there is a motion to extend. to try to
Mr.
close this
Chair,
out.
Mr. Chair, so I would make that motion if there's no debate and we're just going to vote. Is that your understanding of the situation here?
I'll put it to the committee this way. Would there be any further debate on the main motion at this point? We've kind of, as the chairs feel that we've kind of beaten this to death at this point. We are over on time. If we wish to have further debate, then it would be best to pick it up at the next meeting. So I would suggest to this committee that we are close to putting this plank proposal to bed. And if we wish to vote on it tonight, let's just move to extend, forego to do the vote, forego any debate, and let's knock it out. If you wish to debate, let's take it to the next meeting. So
Seems like there's no debate, so I'll move to extend for purposes of taking this roll call vote.
I can second that from last.
okay, is there any objection to extending for the sole purpose of a final vote on this proposed blank amendment? Hearing none, we will extend long enough to do that. We will move to that vote. Mr. Secretary, when you are ready. The motion is to take the government debt plank, strike it out, and replace it with government debt is wholly illegitimate as it burdens the people without their consent. We support repudiating all government debts at all levels as a means of both relieving unjust financial burdens and limiting the growth of government.
Mr. Hofstad,
Aye.
Herbert,
Yes.
I think you said Benner. Yes.
I did. Bergman,
Yes.
Bowman,
Brooksbank votes no.
Yes.
I heard Mr. Bowman say yes, and I heard Mr. Brooksbank say no. Is that correct?
That's what I heard.
Correct.
Coco,
Yes.
Tyler,
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Labrie,
Yes.
Leatherman,
Yes.
Clift,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
and I'm going to vote aye, Mr. Chair.
I'm actually going to vote on this one and vote yes.
I'm sorry, that's out of order.
So was my so was lunch, but that's not the point.
Right, Mr. Chair, I see. "15 aye, 1 nay, no abstentions, and no not voting."
Confirmed by 15-1-0-0. That one passes. Thank you all.
Move to adjourn.
We are at time to adjourn anyway. No motion is necessary. We will reconvene, same bat time, same bat channel next week. I'm going to, at which point we will pick up with Mr. Alsted's proposal for on sex work and the substitute that I have written for that as well. I will stop recording now. We are adjourned at 10 to 15.